Hello and welcome to another episode of Historic Hindsight. I'm John, that's Tom, and today we're talking about American royalty.
That's right, Johnny. American royalty, the thing that we weren't ever supposed to have. Those people that we put up on pedestals way higher than they deserve. Yes, we're starting, it's a brand new series, Johnny. We're talking about the U.S. presidents. And
I am very excited about this series, Tommy, because as I learned in elementary school and middle school and high school and college, our founding fathers are flawless. And I can't wait to hear about what great human beings they were, how they set America up to be as prosperous as we are today, and how really they're model citizens for what Americans should be aiming.
Yeah, exactly. These are our founding fathers, right? And we're going to start.
I mean, we make monuments to them, and we
phallic monuments to them.
Well, their choices are made during that process, and they're representative. It's a metaphor.
And I appreciate, Johnny, how you're looking very dapper yourself today, dressing up your suit.
Thank you very much. You are
bow tie.
You are looking.
Very
like
casual.
You should be running a brothel.
Because I think one of us is dressed just a little bit more appropriate to the respect that these people are deserving. So we're going to start. We're going to start number one, Johnny. Our very first, sort of first president under the Constitution of the United States, are George Washington. Yeah, we forget about the Articles of Confederation, guys. There's like 8 of them before Washington, but
wait, hold up, what? All right, well, I guess you got to teach me about them because I legit never heard about them before.
Story for another time.
Thank you, American education system. We had, I guess, leaders of some sort before our first president. Or were they also called presidents and then we're just like, oh, doesn't count because
it wasn't under the Articles. Yeah, those are the Articles of Confederation. This is the Constitution. Two different things, two different governments.
Gotcha.
So essentially there's been already two different United States.
And we are talking about our 9th president to start
or something. Yeah, something like. Don't quote me on that number. I know that there was many before Washington. I don't know if it was exactly 8 or not. But in any case, George Washington, the man, the myth, the legend, and
that's right.
We're going to talk about some of the less reputable things that we didn't learn about in history class. Everybody knows, couldn't tell a lie, chopped down a cherry tree.
Yes.
Have wooden teeth.
The river thing crossing
the Delaware on the boat, and then apparently throwing a coin over the.
So hold up, are we digging up presidents' old tweets? Is that what this is?
Yeah, we're digging. You know what?
We're gonna dig up George Washington's old tweets and see what he said when he was 16 or whatever.
Johnny, I think you just came up with. A title for this series. This is President's Old Tweets. It's about the best way to look at it. But we're gonna start about the less reputable things. So first off, George Washington, our first president of these great United States, he's gonna start a world war before he's ever even president, and we were never really taught about this.
That's impossible. World War I was in 1915, 18, 20.
There's a few 11. World wars before that one.
I'm pretty sure the people who name the wars know what they're doing, so that can't be the case. He started a war with most of the world involved. We'll call it.
Yeah. Yep. So
before he was president, so it doesn't even count.
These are just their lives in general. We're gonna deep dive into their tweets.
So we are. This is President Old Tweet. All right, that's great.
So in the mid 1750s, France and Britain were at odds with what territories they got to get from the Indians, or acquire through peaceful negotiations and purchasing, because we'd never steal anything outright. So
because this was the Native Americans were having a bidding war on their properties, and France and Britain were the two parties bidding on.
Yep.
They didn't want to be having a bidding war, but we got into it.
Yeah. Have you seen the housing market today, Johnny? It's just like
if you could buy a house, you buy a house.
You buy a house. So specifically, they're disputing over the Ohio Valley, which I don't know why anybody would really care about the Ohio Valley, but this was a hot commodity back in the 1750s.
I mean, it's got a bunch of limestone if you want that.
It does have that. So both nations ran to control the region by building forts all across strategic locations. One such military officer was a young George Washington, just 22 years old, who's going to be sent to what is now Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, with 150 troops to ensure that the French don't start any shit. You know,
all right, so 22 years old, he's an officer at this time. And he's leading a number of men to protect the English.
Yes.
Right, to make sure the French.
We're English, Johnny. Okay. Yes, English.
Right. Yeah. Right. Oh, God. All right. Well, that's can't have that.
So he's going to send out there, and he's going to try to discourage any French movements and prevent any French attacks in the region. Now, natives that were actually friendly to the British Crown warned Washington that a group of 40 French soldiers were camped several miles from his camp, and you know, Washington just can't have that. You know, we can't have the enemy camping so close to us, so we got to go have a friendly conversation about they got to move out of here.
Sure, I mean they are. Having a negotiation on a housing development. And so you talk to him and you say, "Hey guys, what are you doing? You can't be here." And I assume he
peacefully negotiated that. Yes, Johnny. By peaceful, he's going to take several dozen Native Americans with 40 of his troops and surprise the French at Jumonville Glen. And even though the French said that they were diplomats, showed the proper diplomatic paperwork, said that we're not we're not here for military operations. This is diplomats. We are negotiating with you English and the natives around this region, non-military. Granted, there are soldiers there, but we're non-military diplomats. And
I mean, that sounds a bit like they are trying to lie to the future president of the United States of America. Because why would you have, if you're diplomats, why do you have a military there
soldiers with you? Well, you usually have some escorts. But in that case, Johnny, nobody can really prove who shot first, but apparently during these negotiations, diplomat was not believed, and a 15-minute firefight ensues.
It's been settled. Han shot first.
Yeah.
Who's Han in this situation?
Well, Han is George Washington because after 15 minutes, 10 French soldiers lay dead with only one Virginia militiaman lying dead. So if the French fired first, they really screwed the pooch on that one and got the.
As we have learned on this channel before, the French are terrible at war and surrender often. So they probably shot first, but just shot so poorly and into the air that, oh no, they didn't know what they were doing, and then all got gunned down by George Washington's very competent, well-trained,
Virginia militiamen,
law-abiding militiamen.
Well, the problem here, though, Johnny, is that one of those Frenchmen that was killed was French noble diplomat Joseph Coulon de Villiers, and this is going to spark outrage because the French are like, dude had diplomatic papers, and you just fucking straight up murdered him.
And then
can't have this.
Yeah, he died in a battle.
Sure. Now, realizing that Washington...
I don't think that's murder, right?
Well, hold on, Johnny.
It's hard to... It's a gray area.
So, realizing that he screwed up and likely is going to be retaliated against, Washington is going to hightail it out of there and build a makeshift fort called Fort Necessity, which... You know, if anything for Washington,
good on you.
Good name, right?
That's...
Well, it didn't take long for the French to come and completely massacre him at Fort Necessity, take him prisoner.
Well, but not him.
No, him. Washington, yeah.
Yeah, he's not massacred, right?
No, he's taken prisoner.
Wait, hold up. Did we have a zombie for our first president?
No. He was taken prisoner. They massacred his men, took him prisoner. Embarrassingly bad loss here. And while held prisoner, George Washington signs a confession note that says, yep, he was responsible for that killing of the diplomat. Although, to be fair, he was held prisoner by the French, so it's not like he really had a choice in signing that document, but...
Yeah, this is Guantanamo Bay waterboarding type. Like, you're going to make this confession that we need you to make for the reasons we need you
And then England promptly puts him up on a pedestal saying, like, he was a brave and honorable soldier, and how dare they, they come to the aid of Washington, and then this sparks the French and Indian War, which is also known as the 7 Years' War, which gets a whole bunch of other European powers in play, all fighting at each other because they're all trying to like get England and France, who are the two big power players here, shrunk down a couple of notches. Like if we can keep them at war, their finances are going to get screwed, so Spain can come in and take some territory, and
which, as we later learned, their finances being screwed is beneficial.
It is beneficial for
look at that, Tommy. I remember.
You do remember.
That's why we got our independence.
So that's Georgie's first military career that you don't hear about. His embarrassing loss over there at Fort Necessity. Now, in Georgie's,
but he named a fort for necessity, and he made it out alive, and maybe only told a few lies and gave up some information to the enemy.
Yeah. If anything about this series, I want you to know that there's good with bad. Good and bad. Good, bad. Yeah, it's there. Now, right. In Georgie's personal life, he had a very likely illicit affair with a close friend's wife.
Oh, I mean, come on. What? Really? It was the 1700s, Tommy. Who wasn't going around having illicit affairs?
I think this is going to become a theme of all of our presidents, to be honest, illicit affairs.
Is it the affairs bit?
Just weeks before George is going to marry Martha Custis, he's going to write a letter to a Sally Fairfax stating, and I quote, "The world has no business to know the object of my love, declared in this manner to you when I want to conceal it." So talking about...
Hold up, Tommy. I want you to repeat that sentence again and then tell me what it means. Very explicit.
So the world has no business to know the object of my love, declared in this manner to you when I want to conceal it. Basically...
Who has no business?
The world has no business to know that I love you because I'm trying to conceal it.
Tommy, we had no business in this. This is the president's affairs. I mean, sure, he wasn't yet, but this is his affairs, and we're digging up private letters from these folks. Good golly, how do we even know that's really his letter?
I mean, it does have a signature on it, and it has been confirmed by historians to be his letter, and there's multiple letters to Sally. Okay. Now, Sally was the wife of a George Fairfax, who was the largest landowner.
Is she married?
Yeah, she was married to his friend, George Fairfax, who was the largest landowner in Virginia at the time, and a large landowner himself. Washington, George Fairfax would naturally be, I guess, co-workers, companions, compatriots. I mean,
They'd get together at the bar and be like, "Oh, yep, took more land today."
Well, and,
yeah, how many folks you got working your land?
If you want,
how many you paying?
We'll get there, Johnny. Jump the gun a little bit on this one. And Sally actually took young George Washington under her wing when he was actually only a teenager, teaching him the ropes of the social affairs. So like how to properly conduct yourself in the elite society of Virginia, how to properly dress, how to properly act, which fork you're supposed to eat the salad with, including how to dance. So.
She was what age?
She's a little bit old. I don't know her age exactly. She's a little bit older.
A little bit older, but we got to do the divided by 2 + 7 bit because this sounds a little bit like she was grooming him.
She might have been grooming him a little bit. Sally's giving credit for teaching him all this stuff. And there isn't any actual hard proof that these two were hooking up. Minus the letters that said, "I love you." But you're right, Johnny.
I bet George Washington had some hard proof.
Yeah. It could have very easily been a grooming situation. She could have been this guy. George Washington could be a victim of pedophilia. We don't know. I mean, it could have been that.
That's what I'm leaning towards. I mean, good golly, Miss Molly.
But in any case.
All right.
The problem I have here with this, and apologists would be like, he didn't have an affair with her. It was just it was a friendly relationship. The problem here though is why would she keep these love letters if they weren't, in fact, love letters that meant something to her? More to the point here, he only marries Martha to increase his social stature, something that likely Sally would have advised him to do when Martha became a widow and had a crap ton of land and property, and we'll get to what property was in a minute.
Boy, Tommy, the amount of conjecture.
I'm full of conjecture. There's a lot of speculation.
The license, the journalistic license you're taking with all of this.
Oh, yeah.
This is nonsense. She kept the letters because paper was precious, and maybe she would have had to use the backside to write down a recipe someday. And who knows? Maybe she did. Check the backs of the letters, and he was just he was probably a creep.
He's probably a creeper. He's probably had an affair. It's okay. He had an affair with his best friend's wife.
Who wasn't back then? What else are you gonna do?
Well, Johnny, we've been best friends for years, and I have not had an illicit affair with your wife. Huh?
You got Netflix, Tommy. Of course you haven't.
Fair point. Now we can't
have time for that.
We can't do an episode on George Washington without talking about slavery, Johnny. And oh boy, is he just a peach when it comes to this topic.
Now, this is a sore subject for early presidents.
Yeah.
On account of this bit.
Yeah.
Where we're taught as school children that they were flawless.
Yes.
And they were just beacons of humanity and they did nothing wrong. I did not know a president owned a slave until I was in college.
Yeah, like the first 12 were all slave owners.
Yep. And I should have been able to make that connection. But the way we teach history, we don't understand timelines. Nothing makes sense. Everything's kind of all over the place. And nobody ever explicitly said, oh, yeah. These presidents, slave owners.
Now,
on account of the times. And on account of they were high class, wealthy folks and everything else. Just nobody cared
and this is
talk about it.
This is the illicit problem here with Washington in regards to slavery. What we're taught, if we're even taught that he does own slaves, we're taught that he freed his slaves, sort of. And we're taught that he was a reluctant slave owner because he just inherited them from his father. And we're taught things like, oh, well, he never actually bought and sold slaves. It just he inherited them. It's just kind of part of the business. His wife
the reluctant slave owner. Oh, goodness. Oh, what am I going to do with these people who I've inherited?
So now it's time
set them free?
Now it's time to just shit all.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
Instead of setting them free, I guess I'll continue to own them and use them as
it's time to shit all over
people.
Yeah, it's time to shit all over all of that and do some explanations. Now, it is true that it would have been uncouth for him to just outright start freeing slaves at that time if he was wanting to become, popular in society. But, just because you wanted to be cool and not shunned by the Nazi Party doesn't make you any less of a Nazi for supporting them in World War II. So just like then, Washington isn't any less of a slave owner, even though he might have felt a little icky about it, which I'm not entirely sure he did. So we're going to go through it all one point at a time.
Yeah.
So, first on the whole the freeing of the slaves things. Yes, he did in his will say that his slaves would be freed upon his wife's death. And that was his slaves, not her slaves. His slaves would be freed upon his wife's death, because he didn't want his wife to...
And then he would inherit his wife's slaves, or what?
No, so when he died, he freed his slaves in the contract with his wife's slave. So, now, his wife does free...
Why when he dies? Why? Oh, we want him till the end of our death, but to anybody else who might want him...
Two good points here.
Free him now!
First, Washington had no... No, 2 points. Washington had no legitimate children of his own, so he had no heirs to his estate. The 2 children that Martha brought in with her died, unfortunately, of a young age prior to Washington himself dying. So he had no heirs to give his said property to. This is his estate, this is his slaves, all that stuff. There's no heir for it to go to, so it's logical to assume that, well, what else are you going to do with it? All right, well, it'll go to the wife, and then when the wife dies, they get freed. He has no legal authority to free Martha's slaves, who don't get freed. And so he frees his upon the condition of when she dies. Now, she does free them before she dies, but that's on the advice...
Now, this was back... I'm sorry, women could have property?
Yes. Well,
under what circumstances?
White women that are in the aristocracy. But in any case...
Okay, thank you.
So she agrees to free his slaves before she dies on the condition, or not on the condition, but on the request of her friends that say... those slaves know that they're going to be free when you die. So for your livelihood, it might behoove you to free them before you die, before they get
you.
Yes, exactly. Now, reluctant slavery bit. He inherits his slaves, Johnny, right? Which he does. At the age of 11, he inherits 10 slaves from his dad when his dad dies. The problem
must be nice.
The problem with this reluctant part is that he purchased an additional 8 slaves before his marriage to Martha, so...
Well, I mean, come on, you have to keep them company. They get lonely.
And Johnny, by the time of his death, Mount Vernon, his estate, owned 317 slaves.
What the
And records show that he owned upwards.
That I am sorry, Tommy. That is not a reluctant ownership of anything.
No, it's even better, Johnny, because
I have had things. I've owned things reluctantly, where I'm like, maybe I don't want that, but I guess I have to have it. Never have I owned 300 things reluctantly.
Johnny, the estate, Mount Vernon, while Washington was in control of Mount Vernon, records show that at least 577 slaves were owned at the time that he had owned that property. So through his entire duration of him owning Mount Vernon, there were at least 577 accounted for slaves on that property.
I mean, the size of this property. What?
No.
I mean, good God, this is
100 acres.
This is
100 acres.
Just, I mean, at least
miles of
God, at least.
His estate was 500 acres. Sorry, 500 acres is what his estate had. So miles of land here. Now,
God, a person an acre.
Some will argue here that during the Revolution, Washington grew uneasy of the purchasing and owning slaves. There are plenty of people on the internet will argue that, he took a massive loss because as a slave owner, he didn't get in the practice of selling slaves, and which was a massive loss. Now, there are 2 points here which are complete and total bullshit. First, we know that he personally purchased at least 40 slaves through his life. At least, through records that still exist to this day. We also know that the plantation had a lot of births, but still with a lot of births, 40 plus 8 plus the 10 original, that's, 58. 58 to 577 is a fucking hell of a jump to expect that that's all from births.
That's 2 generations of folks, essentially, is what you're. I mean, so the time frame doesn't quite.
It doesn't quite line up there.
Because, I mean, you could go, if you got 58 people, you get the burst, but you assume every 2, if you have it even, so you got, 27, 28.
Yeah, there's a lot of babies that have to be made there.
That's a lot of babies.
Now,
to go from that.
In addition to kind of screw this whole, his land wasn't very profitable and all that other kind of crap that I've heard on the internet, he had the largest whiskey distillery in the United States in his life. And you need a lot of barley and rye
but Tommy
to make said whiskey, and a lot of hands to become the largest distillery in the United States. So needs the labor somewhere.
Yeah, but that says nothing about whether or not his profits are as high as they need to be, because I mean, take today for example, corporate profits are up 4 times what they were last year.
Yeah, true.
And the prices are still going up.
Also true.
And so, because of what your profits are, make more money.
And Johnny, speaking of the labor here on said property, Washington has a pretty sketch reputation on his labor practices with said slaves.
Now, hold up. Wait, what do you mean by labor practice? He's out there, he is being the boss?
Yeah, he is being said boss.
Directing slaves and shit?
Very much had his hands very dirty in this. And naturally, slaves at this time.
That's a bad idea as a politician.
Well, slaves at this time
that's gonna affect his re-election vote.
Not at this time. But slaves are property, and of course, properties are investments. And naturally speaking, you want to get the most bang for your buck. You can't blame a businessman for this, other than the fact that we're talking about human life here.
But okay.
Yeah. So he had his slaves. Yeah. It was his policy to have his slaves work from dawn to dusk, every day, minus Sunday, to get the most labor out of them. This included children, Johnny. Slave mothers, when they had their child, would be pretty much immediately forced to go back to work within a couple of weeks of the baby being born. And that baby would just be put to older women that couldn't work in the fields anymore. They would be responsible for, being the wet nurse, so to speak.
Yeah, as a husband who has had a wife who has given birth.
Yeah. A couple weeks isn't long enough.
Not enough. No, and that is with today's care and with technology and
not the
ice
care of
diapers
1790s.
Yeah. If you don't know about those, look them up. Ice diaper, beep, beep, bang, lifesaver. But good God. All right, so a bit of a tyrant, bit of a, but that was the time. You had the bootstraps, you pulled them up.
Yeah,
right.
The problem here is
you had them,
Johnny. He had
able to.
He had a habit of separating slave families and putting them on opposite sides of the plantation, so that they could only see each other literally by walking miles after their work was done, or on Sundays, again walking literal miles to go see their spouse. Washington even recognized the stupidity of this by complaining that his workers were too tired from visiting their families on their off time. So his solution here was to make them work longer and have even less off time.
So that they didn't have the time then to go from point A to B and back.
Mm-hmm. Now, Washington's own neighbor, Richard Parkson.
All right, so I assume this is just the playbook that all of America's CEOs
No, it is not.
Now.
It is very much not. No. The policy of separating families.
No. The current American CEOs, Tommy.
Oh, are doing. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. That.
Not slave owners back then. Current American CEOs.
Oh, yeah.
Seem
That's
to be
their
doing
playbook.
this same thing.
Yeah, they're taking Washington's playbook. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, Washington's own neighbor, Richard Parkinson, who was a English transplant, stated that, and I quote, "It was the sense of all of his neighbors that he treated his slaves with more severity than any other man." I will preface this with saying,
an asshole.
I will preface this by saying this is the only written record that we have of anybody really outright calling Washington a tyrant and an asshole to his slaves. But with that said,
Twitter
if you are
back then,
if you are a Nazi, you probably aren't going to be saying anything bad about Hitler. If you're a Nazi, so if you're a slave owner, you're probably not going to be saying anything bad about your fellow slave owners.
Yeah.
Because the whole pot calling a kettle black thing.
Yeah, right. Which was especially relevant back then, I would assume, given the relevancy of the statement. At
the very least, he's got this very juxtaposition here with
he's a dickhead plantation owner who drives everybody to work too hard. That's not hard to understand.
No, it's not
hard.
That's
what it is.
Yeah. He also has multiple slaves over his course of running the plantation that ran away, including 9 that joined the British Army during the Revolution to obtain their freedom. So you can't really blame them. They're trying to obtain their freedom by fighting. But he also has a personal slave named Caesar that he's going to post a reward for his return. Caesar's going to escape multiple times, be brought back once on his own accord, be brought back once under force. And his wife's personal slave, Oni, is going to also run away and is never going to be found, despite Washington spending the last few years of his life posting rewards and attempting to get her back, including he kind of found the location of her and wrote a letter and was like, "Can you pretty please come back?" And she's like, "No, I'm good."
So this is weird, right? This is, it's like this weird. They see slaves as property. They're robots. It's essentially what we've turned robots into. It's do the work no one else wants to do. And that's how he's using them. But then he has a connection to one or two of them, and where he's not, it's not this sexual thing. Which, I would get that fine.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that part up.
So he has Caesar that he's I'm obsessed with finding him and bringing him back. Buy another fucking slave, bud. What are you doing?
Well, Johnny, it's property, and if somebody stole your car, you're gonna want your car back, right? But
okay, yeah, fine, but I'm gonna buy another car until I can get it back.
I am glad that you brought up the whole sexual component.
Because guess how many cars get found, Tommy? It's not a high percentage.
Not a high percentage. Johnny, I'm glad you brought up the sexual component because I can't continue the conversation without bringing this up. So there will be future presidents that have had illicit children with their slaves. There were accusations that George Washington himself had illicit children with some of his slaves, although it is likely that he didn't, because it is likely that since he didn't have children with his wife Martha, who clearly could have children because she had children himself, he also was a childhood victim of I think the measles or the mumps.
Shooting blanks.
Yeah, it's very likely that most historians believe that George Washington was shooting blanks. Now, that doesn't actually mean he wasn't raping his slaves, because he was known to have
I mean, of course,
Johnny,
of course, he was putting it in his property, Tommy.
Well,
I mean, what else? Why else would you have them?
He had several slaves over his lifetime that were known to be sleeping companions. That would help him sleep at night. They'd sleep in his bed for him and help comfort him. And I'm sure there was no sexual component to that at all.
No, it was just he needed body. It was there weren't space heaters at the time. You needed a body warmer.
Yeah, need a body warmer. Going back to the whole separation of families, he does use that as a punishment. Where he would sell his slaves that were not cooperating to separate them from families to other plantations, and if that wasn't enough,
no, he already used it for punishment by separating.
No, then he sells them off to another plantation where they can't.
And now he's like,
access.
all right, you can't see him ever.
And Johnny, if that wasn't even good enough, he sold at least 3 slaves that we know of as punishment to the West Indies to separate them from their families: a Tom in 1766, a Will Shag in 1772, and a Jack in 1791. Johnny, 1791, just 8 years before his death, well after the revolution is underway, and taken when he's allegedly like, oh, I have moral obligations or convictions against selling and buying slaves, he's selling a fucking slave as punishment to the West Indies in 1791 on record.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, we gained our independence in 1776.
Well, that's what the Declaration of Independence. I mean, yeah, but we were still fighting a war over that.
And then when was his first year as president?
I will put that up in a link underneath here because I don't have that off the top of my head, Johnny.
What?
I don't have it off the top of my head.
Oh God!
And more to the point, if this guy is so it's around this time because Johnny, if he's so
1789,
if he's so against the buying and selling of slavery, we're taught that he was towards the end of his life in favor of abolition, at least privately, which is sketchy in and of itself because he's got no public documentation saying I don't support slavery. Slavery should end. And my big argument here against why he doesn't actually believe that is in 1793, he's going to sign into law the Fugitive Slave Act, which allows owners to hunt down slaves that escaped into another state or other federal territory. So if you didn't know this, Johnny, that's also a big sticky point.
This was just because he was all pissed off because he couldn't find his slaves.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
Petty motherfucker.
And speaking of slavery, Johnny, we got to jump into Washington's teeth. So most people are taught that he had wood teeth for his dentures, which we don't.
That's right, wooden teeth.
Which God knows,
amazing at the time.
God knows where this came from because, that wasn't a thing.
I know.
That was never a thing. And God knows why.
Wasn't there a time in the early 1900s when we're like, "Oh, America was never racist"?
Yeah, it could be. That could have been the reason. That could be the reason.
Was it during that?
Now, his teeth were actually made of human and ivory, and the most enlightened of us know that those human teeth were actually from slaves. Which we know this because his dentist's invoice specifically show that 9 of those human teeth were purchased from his slaves directly. And at least you're sitting here going, well, at least he purchased those teeth. Well, Johnny...
No, I'm not saying that because who got the money?
The slaves did. I mean, he purchased them from the slaves. Now, the problem here is that he paid 14 shillings a tooth, which was 1/3 the price of a white tooth from a freedman. So it's not like he was paying them fair compensation.
Before.
The even creepier
numbers, right? What wasn't there? No, it was 3/5.
3/5. Yeah, that's way down the line, Johnny. You're in a time machine.
Jumping the gun here. All right. Well, but we're not far off.
To make this whole thing even creepier, Johnny, before he turned to dentures, he actually tried dental implants. Taking a tooth from another person and then jamming that into the gaping hole where your tooth that was recently pulled
used to be. God,
and shockingly, that doesn't work.
I'm sorry. And dentistry, modern dentistry, horrifies me. Hate it.
Archaic dentistry?
Every bit of it. And it is the best it's ever been in the history of the world. Yeah. I cannot, like, the whole time traveler thing and all that, you don't time travel if you got a sore tooth.
No.
Like, you got to make sure all of that's right
before
you go back and pass. Because they're going to give you a shot of whiskey, take a chisel, take a hammer, and knock that motherfucker out, and then give it to a president.
Yeah, and it would actually be done by your barber, most likely too. You know, the guy that cuts your hair.
Oh, that's right. That's what.
And a dentist, all.
That's what that symbol,
yep,
right?
Yep.
It's the red and white, the blood and bandages for the. Oh,
no, Johnny, I'm
God.
gonna put a picture. I'm gonna put a picture because we still actually have his dentures. So I'm gonna put a picture of that monstrosity, which I can't blame the guy for not wanting to wear this or not liking to wear this, because oh my God, that would have to be horribly uncomfortable. Now he paid a whopping $60 or just under $2,000 today for it. So
that's not bad.
Really,
dental work?
I mean, when I first heard $60, which was like 3 months worth of work at the time or something like that for him, in inflation calculator, $2,000 isn't really that bad. I mean, that's about what
I paid like $4,500 for my boy's braces.
So yeah, I guess healthcare was cheaper.
Okay, but was it healthcare or was it health? I don't give a fuck about you. Because it seemed more like that.
You might be on to something.
Oh, sorry, you're dead.
And by the way, Johnny, nobody, like no modern historian knows where the hell the wooden teeth myth comes from, other than the fact that it's a hell of a lot easier to teach.
I'll tell you where it comes from, Tommy. I'll be your modern historian telling where it comes from. It comes from the early 1900s when we tried to cover up that all the founding fathers were racist motherfuckers who owned slaves, and we're like, well, we're slave teeth. They were wooden teeth. He carved them himself and put them in there from the cherry tree he didn't chop down when he was a baby boy. That's where it came from, Tommy.
Yeah,
good God, it's not that hard to figure out.
That's where I was going with it. And Johnny, finally, but last but not least, by any stretch, we can't talk about George Washington without talking about the fact that he was the only president to directly command forces in the field against his own populace.
Oh, wait. Hold on. Wait. What?
Yeah, we did an episode of this one, Johnny. So in 1794, as president, Washington commanded troops in the field against a group of protesters that were fighting over an unfair tax levied upon them on their whiskey, which is weird because George Washington owned the largest whiskey distillery and might have benefited from a whiskey tax that put competition out of business.
No, that had nothing to do with it. Don't be ridiculous, Tommy. But okay, so and so Civil War though.
No, this is yeah. Well, yes, it was technically speaking, it was our first Civil War.
But does the Civil War not count because they seceded? Lincoln never lead troops?
I guess you could. Yeah, Lincoln never led troops in the field. No, Washington.
And so that's
what Washington personally got on a horse.
That's the distinction.
Yes, got on a horse and led troops into battle. This beautiful flag behind us that I have in all of our episodes.
Yeah, because this is the whiskey.
This is the Whiskey Rebellion. This is the Whiskey Rebellion. Watch that episode. It is fun in and of itself.
It's fine.
And like this hypocrite, George Washington is a very big hypocrite, which is appropriate because he was a hypocrite in everything in his life, including religion, which we love talking about religion.
I mean, he was a politician, Tommy.
Founding fathers they all loved God, right? Well, he did as
No. The founding fathers didn't all love God, Tommy. That's some bullshit modern day Christian myth.
Yeah, I know. And so
they were all a bunch of fucking atheists who said separate.
Well, I know.
Fucking church from the state.
Speaking of the hypocrite here, Washington himself encouraged other people to practice religion and attend church on a regular basis, which he himself did not do. And when he did do it on the rare occasion, he bounced before communion even hit. So, anyways, dude's a hypocrite. He also led a revolution against unfair taxes that led an army to crush that revolution, hence why we exist. He's like, no taxation representation. And then, as president, to, crush the Whiskey Rebellion, he leads a group of soldiers against a population that was protesting an unfair tax that was levied upon them.
He needed money. And what are you gonna do?
Yeah, he needed money.
He needed those taxes. Give them to me, please.
So that's
England didn't need it. They totally didn't waste all their money before that helping us, and so they didn't need it. They were fine. They were just being greedy. We needed it. He needed it.
Yeah,
It's fine.
It's fine. It's okay. It's cool. So that's George Washington in a nutshell about some of the things that you didn't learn about him. So stay tuned. I think we're gonna do this maybe once monthly. We're gonna start going down the presidents one by one. So in a couple of 4 years, if I don't get bored with this, we'll be done.